Hey, my name is Robin Alvarez, and I am the author of When Oceans Rise, which is like a Filipino Little Mermaid retelling. I'm also the editor of the forthcoming Monsters and Masquerade, which is coming out April 2025 as a fantasy horror anthology. Today we're going to be talking about connections that count, networking for authors. But what is networking? Networking can feel like a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot, but for authors, it can be one of the most powerful tools to grow your career. Networking is about building genuine relationships with people who can help you grow as a writer. It's not about self-promotion or collecting contacts. It's about making connections with people who share your goals, your interests, your passions. One of my biggest regrets as an author is that I didn't start networking sooner. Like a lot of other people, I thought of networking as a cheat. There's this misconception that if someone gets ahead because of networking, then they didn't really earn what they got. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Networking is work. It takes a lot of time to build relationships, and it takes as much or more give than you are going to get. But one of the reasons that I stress networking is because I spent 13 years silently writing, quietly querying literary agents with no results. It was only when I decided to start connecting with people in the industry, when I had a yes man year and I said yes to any opportunity that came across my path, did I actually start getting results and finally got that book deal. Was my writing suddenly better because I was networking? No! The skills that I had been honing for years were always there, but getting eyes on that book, getting other opportunities to edit and write, those came from building connections that catapulted me much further than I could have gone alone. So today we'll talk about networking on social media, in messages, and at conferences. Let's begin by talking about social media networking. We start with finding our community, which begins with branding ourselves. Think carefully about the content you create and how it should mirror what you write so that you attract an audience with similar interests. These people will become your people. When branding, consider things like your voice. This is the tone and style of how you post. Are you funny, witty, emotional, professional, or relatable? How are these things conveyed in your writing so that people, when they are viewing your content, know what to expect in your book? Similarly, you would also consider these things with your visuals. You want to have consistent colors, fonts, and imagery that reflect your books and your personality. Think about the kind of themes that are in your stories, the topics that you want to be known for, and make posts that highlight those things. Talk about your genre, your values, your interests. If your book is a lot about mental health like mine, that might be something you consider talking about. If you write a lot about mythology, talk about mythology. Also consider in your branding how you want to connect with people. How are you going to engage with your followers? Is it going to be through comments, through direct messages, through sharing relatable and interactive content? If you are interested, for example, in writing YA fantasy, it wouldn't be very beneficial to come onto a platform and make content about nonfiction. Not because nonfiction isn't good, but because you are going to start pulling in people who are interested in nonfiction who might not be interested in YA fantasy, even if they really like your content. Additionally, you might pull in mutuals, people who follow you that you also follow, who, as kind and as helpful as they want to be, may not have the connections or the knowledge of your area of interest, which would benefit you professionally. So we're going to be mindful about our branding. But we are also going to be careful about what platform we choose to be on. If you are not comfortable being on video, then do not choose a video-based platform. Don't run to TikTok because it's popular. Don't race over and get on YouTube Shorts. Be comfortable on the platform that you choose. People can tell when you don't feel authentically you, and it does make connecting harder. Not impossible, because people are kind, but just harder. We want to be comfortable because being comfortable makes connecting a lot easier. So you've branded yourself in a way that best helps you find your audience, and you've chosen the platform that makes you feel the most comfortable, but how you get your content to find the right people. Some of it is just that platform's really good algorithm for finding you your audience, but you can also help that algorithm along by using relevant hashtags. Things like am writing, book talk, writing community, bookstagram. I also encourage you, depending on the platform and its capabilities, to join groups and threads and interact with readers and authors, which brings me to my next point, engaging effectively. Engaging effectively is where the real networking on social media begins. You are now making bookish content and it is amazing. You've worked hard on it. And the general rule of thumb is that when people comment on your post, you respond back. That is really engaging, and it really encourages that person to follow you, to respond to you, to connect with you. But perhaps you feel like despite being this proactive and working this hard, your following isn't growing as fast as you want, or maybe not much at all. Well, the next thing that I tell people to do is that every time you post, go comment on 10 other people's posts. And these shouldn't just be heart emojis either. These should be thoughtful or funny or engaging comments that facilitate conversation. But whose post do you go to? Generally, you want to post on people's content who have the audience that you want and the platform that you want. If they are a really big creator, will they respond back? Probably not. Not if they have hundreds of thousands of people following them and hundreds of comments to look at. But other people will see your comment and they will engage. If that comment is compelling enough, they might even follow you. Remember that at the heart of networking, you are trying to build relationships, whether these are professional relationships strictly or eventually become friendships. Remember when I said that networking is a lot about giving as much or more than you get? Well, one of the ways that you can network on social media is to boost other creators, other authors, even bookish readers that you really admire. You can do this by posting book recommendations, by hosting interviews on your blogs or in lives, doing Q&As. Get people to be interested in following because perhaps they get something from you. They are going to feel so grateful that oftentimes you do get something in return. We can't expect it, but people are usually really grateful and generous like that. And you just don't know what you are going to get back in return until you start giving. Which leads me to my next topic of how do we reach out to other creators and network in messaging? And is there messaging etiquette? Yes. Yes, there is. For this section, I'm going to give a few different scenarios because there are a lot of working parts. Are we messaging in email? Are we messaging in social media? I want to be specific about your actions and the etiquette you take depending on your scenario. Let's start with social media because we just spoke about it. Now, if you are on a platform and someone is mutually following you back, then generally it is acceptable to DM them. I would start by talking about something specific that you admire about them or their content. If their content has been very educational for you, if it is the brain break you need because it is so humorous and it kind of gets you through your writing day. If there was a specific video that you found very educational about the industry and you wanted to pick their brain about it. Be specific in your compliments so they know that you really are engaging in their content and you mean it. Now, the rest of this message can go a couple of ways depending on what you are seeking out of this conversation. If you are asking for something like an interview, then you want to give very specific details about what you are looking for, what you are requesting from them. If you are wanting to just be closer to this person, I really suggest that you think of a question to ask them, but this question has to be so specific. It cannot be something that you could have just easily Googled. For example, asking them, how do you query an agent? We can Google that. We can find the answer. I know that one-on-one advice can be very helpful, but it generally isn't helpful when you are trying to make these kinds of connections. It's so much better to ask them a specific question. For example, if their agent is your dream agent, then you might reach out and say, hey, your agent's my dream agent. Do you have any advice for how I can specifically query that agent? Your connection to that person is likely to be better because you came to them for advice that only really they could give. Also, there's some psychological research, and don't quote me on this, but there's research that suggests that people are more likely to like you if they feel like they've helped you. And if your ask is not that big an ask, like what an easy win. In these scenarios where you both know each other, feel free to keep your tone casual and light. If you are trying to reach out to someone on social media that does not follow you back, perhaps they are an author or even an editor or an agent, just know that that message is likely to be filtered and they will probably never see it. In this case, it would be better to email them. You might find this information in their bio or perhaps on their website. Make sure to let them know how you got their email. Then proceed with your authentic admiration and the follow-up ask, which is either your invitation or the question that you have. In these scenarios where this person is not your mutual, it is best to keep a more professional tone, especially if this is an editor or an agent that we hope to one day have a professional relationship with. We generally don't want to speak to them as if we expect friendship, even if one day we might have that friendship. Remember that we don't know that person. We hear things from agents like, show us why you picked us, but most of the time they mean professionally. So they might post a picture of their dog, or they have their college listed on their LinkedIn, but we don't want to mention things like that when we are messaging them because we don't know how they will receive that information. Lots of agents and editors do social media, but is there a professional space to follow and interact with industry professionals? Some might say LinkedIn. It is better to be following them on LinkedIn and cheering on their successes when they post things like they did another book deal or their author got an award. They'll start to remember or recognize your name when you do finally reach out to them. And remember that while what I am saying might have exceptions, we just don't know if we are going to be the exception, so it is better to remain professional. In the scenarios I presented, we have gone from reaching out to people who we follow on social media to also reaching out to people who we follow on LinkedIn. But in both scenarios, we don't know these people and we are blind emailing them, which means that we might not get a response from them. This brings me to another way to reach out to people without doing blind emails. There may be times in your author career where you want your book to be seen in a space, but you don't have any connections to people in those spaces. For example, perhaps you want an exclusive cover reveal with Teen Vogue, but you don't know anybody at Teen Vogue. In this case, you might look to your mutuals to see if you can get a warm introduction. A warm introduction is where a mutual might connect two people who don't know each other, but who would benefit from having a working relationship with each other. So in this scenario, you might look through your LinkedIn for a mutual who has a connection with someone at Teen Vogue. You would reach out to the person that you know and ask if they could give you a warm introduction. If that person feels comfortable doing it, they would introduce you in an email to that person from Teen Vogue. This gives you a credible and personal way to connect with that person from Teen Vogue without having to send a blind email. Here are some other tidbits of advice to follow when you are messaging people, whether you know them or not. Try not to be too pushy in your request. When somebody responds to your request, whether they have said yes or no to the thing that you are asking for, or whether they give you the advice you're looking for, make sure to thank them. It takes a lot of time to reach back out to somebody. And you want to leave a positive impression. If somebody sends you a request, make sure that you respond to them, even if you can't do it. Thank them for considering you. You can perhaps even recommend other people if you were not the right fit for the request that they are making. Remember to always treat people with kindness and act like everybody is somebody because you don't know who they're going to be someday. Finally, let's talk about networking at conferences. First things first, when should you start? Well, if you have the financial means, I recommend that you start as soon as you can. You don't even have to have started your writing journey yet to benefit from conferences. They are valuable at every stage of your writing journey. If you don't have the financial means, the good news is there are a lot of free virtual conferences that you can attend. It will cost a little bit of your time to find those conferences, but they do exist and they are still valuable for networking and for learning. These are great opportunities to build connections with people who will share tips and other opportunities that you might not have found on your own without having attended these events. For example, you might meet people in the audiences or hear of opportunities in panels of writing groups, of editing services, of mentorships with professionals in the industry, like authors who are willing to mentor writers or agents and editors who are doing the same. If you are already an author, oftentimes we share information about other bookish events that are worth going to. If you don't have an agent yet, don't have an editor yet, or are in between agents, you might also find out about other conferences that do pitch sessions. You can attend these conferences to learn and connect with other people. But you can also attend to teach a workshop, and you don't even have to be a published author to do it. I was teaching workshops on how to be on TikTok after I got my book deal, but before my book was published. I wanted as many people as possible to connect with, to know about my book deal, to help support me, to teach me things that I didn't know how to do, but I also wanted to give. I wanted to give knowing that I might not get something back in return. From that first class, I met a lot of wonderful people that I am still connected with on social media today. People who have gifted me their time, shared opportunities with me, supported me, and I couldn't imagine this author journey without them. I also even had a New York Times bestselling author sitting in the front seat of that workshop who I am still connected with on social media today. You just don't know who's going to be in that room with you, and you don't know who's going to be the person sitting next to you. Let's begin by talking about in-person conferences, starting with being a presenter and then moving into networking as a conference goer. So when you get up to teach a class, you are going to introduce yourself, talk about your writing journey, and why you are an expert on that topic. And so people might approach you after your workshop to ask you for advice and to connect, and that's great. But what do you do if you're not teaching a workshop? This is going to be nerve-wracking, but you are going to have to turn to that person next to you and introduce yourself. Tell them your name, tell them what you are writing, and then ask them their name. Ask them what they are writing. Most people are too nervous, and they're going to be very grateful that you opened up the conversation. Bring business cards. I always forget to bring business cards. Also, ask them if they want to connect on social media. This is your opportunity to also give if you've got the chance. If you are going to go to other events, you can talk about those other events you're going to go to. If you've seen opportunities for, I don't know, submitting to a poetry contest, an anthology that's been opened up, talk about those things. It may seem like you are lessening your chance of getting into those opportunities, but you're also, when you are sharing information like that, opening up a door for them to share opportunities with you too. As far as connecting with professional people at these events, I suggest looking at the event schedule ahead of time. See who is speaking on these panels and do a little research on them. It is not a bad idea to make a list of questions before you've even seen their panel so that you are ready when they open up the floor to a Q&A. During their panel, look at your questions and see if you can customize some of the questions that you had to some of the things that they are saying. This is going to make your question that much more personal to the person that you are asking on that panel, and much more memorable. Afterwards, sometimes there is a little time for people in the audience to go up to the table and talk to the panelists. This is yet again another opportunity to ask specific questions to the people that you are talking to. In some cases, it might be okay to ask that person if you can email them in the future about whatever it is that they specifically are an expert on. But ready yourself Be aware that they might say no. And it usually has nothing to do with you. It usually has to do with them being very busy. Maybe they've got deadlines to meet. Maybe they're going on a book tour, okay? They might not have the time. And so they'll politely say no, and that's okay. Ready your heart. Thank them for the opportunity to listen to them speak on that panel, to talk to them, and then move on so that other people have an opportunity to talk to them as well. At these conferences, there's going to be opportunities to socialize. Sometimes there's glamorous as dances. Sometimes there are these really beautiful dinners where you actually get to sit with a group of people. Sometimes they're just small moments at the snack bar where you're grabbing that coffee, that much needed coffee, and that snack. Look for these opportunities to introduce yourself to multiple people. Ask them questions. Ask them if they're part of writing groups. Ask them what their role is at this conference. Any kind of small talk that you can do to get yourself comfortable talking to people, to perhaps even meet your new best writing friend. Try to be aware of these moments in your schedule and kind of prepare yourself to talk. Questions are your friends here, okay? When you are trying to meet people and you want to show interest, questions are your friends. So mentally prepare some questions in your head. Again, it's as easy as just saying, hey, I'm Robin. I like to write YA fantasy. What is your name? What do you like to write? Let's move on to talking about virtual conferences and how we can network when we are behind a computer. Networking at a virtual conference can begin with good preparation. Just as you would at an in-person conference, you would do research on the presenters ahead of time by looking at the conference schedule. Follow them on social media or on LinkedIn. Just as you would get ready for an in-person conference, you will similarly get ready for a virtual conference by updating your profile, your headshot, your name, your social media links on whatever platform that the conference is going to function on. It could be Zoom, YouTube, some kind of app, some kind of Discord or Slack. These spaces have the ability for you to make sure that you present yourself as professionally as possible and make it as easy as possible for people to find you socially. Sometimes virtual conferences will have apps, and within these apps, there might be lounges to hang out in and tools to connect with. People might share valuable information and services about other events or other organizations that they are participating in, but they might also be looking for support because this career can get lonely. You can also share information you think would be valuable. Again, we don't gatekeep. Now, what happens when you are in session? Similarly to being in a room where you would quiet down when the panel starts speaking, sometimes the moderators will mute the audience and or turn off the cameras. If you have access to the chat box before the session starts, drop your name, at least one social media handle that you'd love to connect on, and what you hope to get out of the session. As the panel begins, you can continue conversation in the chat. Once again, prepare to participate in any Q&As, but also one of the benefits of a virtual conference is that they might do breakout rooms, and these are excellent spaces to connect. Make sure you speak up, but that you are also actively listening by asking other people their thoughts and opinions on whatever activity you are expected to do. After your sessions, you can make sure to post updates on your social media platforms about the conference. Make sure you hashtag it so that it's findable. Other people at the conference might do the same and stumble upon your post, giving you another chance to form connections. Similarly, you can also look up those hashtags and engage with others who are at this event with you. On your social media posts, make sure to tag the event's platform. You can also tag the speakers from the panels if you found their help valuable. This might open up more opportunity to connect with them in the future. Whether you are a published author at these conferences or you are someone who is aspiring to be published, it is a good idea to practice your elevator pitch for when people suddenly ask you what it is you're writing and to describe your book. It can be very nerve-wracking to not have it prepared. An elevator pitch is 1 to 2 sentences that get to the heart of what your book is about, and they generally are very exciting. It's also good to remember some key selling points like the age and genre of your book, but also things like comp titles. Practice these responses so that you feel really comfortable and natural when you are speaking about yourself and your book. For both in-person and virtual conferences, a few days after the conference has ended and everyone has had time to rest, reach out to your new contacts, as in the ones that you consider colleagues, and just touch base with them. Write a message that's personal to them and the experience that you two had together. Like, hey, it was so great to meet another person who's on their second book. Are you attending any other conferences? Just remind them of who you are and that you would love to stay connected. You can also reach out to panelists if they have given out their contact information, but this is very situational advice. For example, if they welcomed the participants to submit pages, use the email for just that and nothing else. Throughout this video, I've talked about giving more than you get, whether you form these relationships at conferences, by email, or on social media. And I want to talk a little bit more about what that could mean, what that could look like. I once saw an author say that one of the best things she did before she got her book deal was to get her name in as many acknowledgement sections as possible. My advice, very similarly, was that after I got my book deal, I said yes to as many blurbs as possible, to what could fit within my time frame, depending on how busy I was at that moment, which is another way to get my name in or on someone else's book. Now, let's not be fooled here. We are not saying that big influencers saw our names on those books, agents and editors read our names in those books, and then threw opportunities at us. That is not what we are saying benefited us from doing things like that. No, doing these things was more about giving of your time and of your skill to another person that benefits them and then in turn benefits you in unimaginable ways. It can happen because those people return the same favor to you one day. Or they might just remember you when opportunities come up. Things like collaborating on anthologies together, or doing book signings together, or when they are assembling a panel at a conference. People remember kindnesses, and sometimes those kindnesses return in ways that you never could have predicted. Remember that you are not forming these bonds with the expectation to get something in return. But don't be surprised when networking does open doors and opportunities for you that you just never imagined could happen. Make authentic connections, be yourself, find your people. Thank you for watching this video and taking this time with me today. I hope that you find me on social media. Let me know that you saw this video and we will connect. I can't wait to meet you on the other side.